Croeso I bawb. Good evening and welcome everybody to this evening's session of the Hybig Cymru Conference, A New World Red Meat 2021 and Beyond. My name is Claire Williams and I'll be your chair for this evening. I'm a beef and sheep farmer from North Carmarthenshire and a HCC board member. Now I'm joined this evening by Professor Chris Elliott OBE. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Claire.
Thank you. And I actually have an in-house team of HCC experts behind the scenes in the form of the executive, who will be there later on to field questions. So the title of this evening's session is Building a Food Supply System Based on Integrity. Lessons learned from COVID. Now, I don't know if many of you have had the opportunity to join us earlier in the week, but we've spent a lot of time looking at the effects of this dreadful pandemic has had on our red meat supply chain. And certainly how that's played out in terms of consumer behaviours, buying and spending patterns, in terms of the independent and multiple retail sector, the devastating loss of our food service sector, and in terms of how that's affected us operationally in our processing sector, both looking at the supply in the domestic consumer demand in the domestic market, but also meeting the expectations of our valued export customers. So I feel incredibly privileged to be able to welcome a world-leading expert. Chris, whose specialisms lie in meat supply chains, sustainability, and food security. Now, I'm going to be asking Chris this evening to give us his perspective on how he feels the world has changed in 2020, and perhaps more importantly, what he feels the implications will be for the future. Professor Chris Elliott, he's a professor of food safety at Queen's University, Belfast. He's a founder of the Institute for Global Food Security. He's a visiting professor at the China Agricultural University in Beijing and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. A recipient of a Winston Churchill Fellowship and is an elected fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry and Royal Society of Biology. Chris led the British government's independent review of food systems in 2013, and in 2017 he was awarded the Royal Society of Chemistry Theophilus Redwood Prize and was also awarded an OBE. So I've had the very great pleasure of hearing Chris speak on previous occasions, and for me he was by far and away the standout speaker of the event. So I am genuinely excited to hear what Chris has got to share with us this evening. And I will be asking participants in this meeting to really concentrate the angle of their questions towards Chris's speech. More than happy to field HCC questions, but I would prefer them to be dealt with by the exec at a later date after the event. So please get your questions in early. Get them up on the scroll screen to your right-hand side there, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can in the time allowed. But if we fail, Chris has assured me that he's very willing to answer them post the event. Chris will be delivering his presentation verbally. Thank goodness for that. So there'll be no PowerPoint. And without further ado, it gives me very great pleasure to hand you over to Chris. Chris, the stage is yours.
Yeah, many thanks for the introduction, Claire, and also the invitation to present at the conference. You know, I really wish we were all together somewhere having these great discussions about big ticket items, and hopefully at some stage next year we will be. So I guess there's two important things. First of all, for all of those of you who are from Wales and don't understand my accent, subtitles will appear on the screen very soon, okay? Second thing is, this is one of the most important nights of the year because Northern Ireland are playing Slovakia in 1 hour 45 minutes, and I will be watching the match, not doing anything else. So the timing of this is really perfect. I'm so nervous. Now, I really like the idea of the title of this session is about food integrity, because often we hear lots of discussions about food security, and food security is really very, very important. And actually, the definition of food security came about 25 years ago at the World Food Summit that was hosted by United Nations. But 25 years is a long time, and I believe it's actually time not to think so much about food security, but much more about integrity, because it encompasses many, many more things. There is no formal definition of food integrity. I have written one. I sent it to the United Nations, and I'm still waiting for their reply. So it's a bit informal, let's say. But when I think and talk about food integrity, I talk about 7 core principles. I'm just going to walk through those principles first of all, because I think it's what we all need to think about and galvanize our efforts towards the future food supply system, not of just these islands, but on a global basis. So the 7 principles are: what about how safe is our food? What's the nutritional standards of our food? And how authentic is our food? Those are the first 3. And then in terms of number 4, it's sustainability. How sustainable is the food production systems? And number 5 is about the ethics. Are we using the highest possible ethical standards of the food that we are producing and consuming? And the last 2 principles are about respect and protect. We've got to respect and protect our planet going forward for future generations. But we also have to respect and protect all of those people who work in producing our food, right from primary agriculture, right through to those people who sell us our food, serve us our food, be it in retail or in hospitality. So those 7 principles cover a lot of ground, and I will tell you there's massive conflicts that can happen between those when we talk about them. Now, I think just in terms of right now, in terms of where we're sitting in terms of the global pandemic, I just wanted to focus first of all a little bit just on our own islands, the UK and Ireland. I talked about food safety, and we are very, very lucky. We have a very safe food supply system, and we should be very thankful about that. But there's a couple of big things have changed this year. One is the really big growth and interest in home cooking now, and which is, I think, is fantastic. But actually, a lot of people are not really sure how to cook properly and safely at home. Even the storage of food has become quite a big issue. And certainly all the trend analysis would say that this idea about home cooking isn't going to go away, and that there's a lot of education has to be done for consumers to make sure that the food that is prepared is safe. But also one of the things that has changed is the way that we purchase food, and much more of the purchasing is online now. Now, there is the online purchasing from Tesco's and Marks and Spencer's and all the big retailers. That's not what I'm talking about now. It's all of the other ways we can go online and buy food now. So, for instance, when I want to buy fish, I just go to a little fishmonger in Portaferry, which is about 40 miles away. I order my fish and it gets delivered once a week, and I'm really very happy about that. Some of the things that do concern me is, for instance, the marketplaces that are opening up on Facebook and other social media platforms. That is pretty much unregulated territory, and I describe it as the Wild West, okay? You can sell anything there, you can make any sorts of claims you want about it, and my advice to people is don't buy off it. You just don't know what you're getting, and you don't know what quality it is or how safe it is. I also talked about nutrition and the importance of nutrition. And my goodness, if nothing else that we have learnt during this pandemic is the impact of bad nutrition. So when you look at this, the stats, one of the biggest causative issues in terms of mortality for COVID-19 is obesity, and particularly suffering from type 2 diabetes. And that is all about bad nutrition. It's about too many calories and not enough micronutrients. The other, I think, quite startling statistic is that of all of those people admitted to hospital for treatment for COVID-19, 80%, 80, were deficient in vitamin D. Wow, 80%. So already we can see issues about bad nutrition, too many calories, not enough micronutrients. And I really hope this is something that as a nation we can address going forward. And you know, we've got the great work of Henry Dimbleby in terms of the National Food Strategy. There's the Prime Minister's, he tells us he's going to make us all eat healthily now because he was overweight and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully nutrition will really climb up the agenda going forward. There's also the issues about the authenticity of the food that we are buying at the moment. And you know, I do an awful lot about looking at issues about fraud in the global food supply system. And where we sit, I think, in the UK and Ireland at the moment, I think things are okay, but I do expect quite a number of big challenges coming down the line. It could be 3 months, 6 months, probably not much longer than that. And that is, again, because of the massive disruption to the global food supply system. Lots of the checks and audits and inspections have basically disappeared. And it's going to take a long time to get that infrastructure back up and running again. Now, the last of my kind of 7 principles I just wanted to make reference to was sustainability. And, you know, there are people who are much, much more knowledgeable about sustainability than I am. And I know there's a great speaker going to talk about beef and some of the issues there. But just in some recent conversations I'm having with some farmers last week was, what's the impact of animal health on sustainability? Poor animal health versus good animal health. Because if your animals aren't thriving, it takes them longer to reach maturity. You're actually having to feed them more. And actually then when you start to do all of your calculations about the use of nutrients and carbon balance and water balance, it must have a massive impact. The second issue in terms of sustainability that I was talking about this week, and we had some really intensive discussions, was about the quality of the cereals that animals are eating, particularly around mycotoxins and the presence of mycotoxins in animal feed. I did a really big study with a group last year, and we found that somewhere between 60% and 80% of all cereals sold globally contain one or more mycotoxins. Now, often when we talk about mycotoxins, people get worried about legislative limits and guidance limits and so forth. We published a study just about 2 months ago when we looked at poultry production and the impact that low levels of mycotoxins had on the performance over quite a longitudinal study. And I tell you, it was incredibly big. Now, if we're having that effect on poultry, we'll probably be having that effect on all of the monogastrics, but also ruminants as well are susceptible to mycotoxins. And it's one of the things that I hope to do sometime this year or probably complete it next year, is to start to do a calculation about the impact of mycotoxins on animal production in terms of sustainability, environmental sustainability. So just a couple of things that cropped into my head. Now, that was really just about local things. think what I was actually asked to talk about, and I'll finally get round to it now because I'm having a really good ramble now, and it's about impact on supply chains that have been caused by the global pandemic. And this big map behind me, I think I've visited just about every country that's there. And over the last 9 months, I've had multiple discussions with lots of people in different regions of the world talking about the impact on supply chains of COVID-19. And it is absolutely massive. I will tell you that I am still quite staggered how in the UK we can still keep all of our supermarket shelves full. Really, in terms of some of the things that are happening in other countries, I just see disaster striking. More people suffering from malnutrition now than in the history of the world. So again, we can think ourselves extremely lucky that, well, excuse me for being a little bit political, but it wasn't left to the government to put food on our plates. It was actually left to the agriculture and food industry to put food on our plates. So I think we're unbelievably thankful for all of those people who have worked so hard during the pandemic. Now, when I've talked about the impact of COVID-19 and the things that really we're thinking about more and more now, there are three, I think, really very big ticket items. And the first is back to sustainability again. And I think there is so much more awareness that our food supply systems have to be sustainable. It's been talked about for a long time, and there has been some really good initiatives happening in various places. But my goodness, some of the big multinationals that I talk to, sustainability is now absolutely top of the pile. One very large multinational company that I talked to said was they will only be investing in projects that drive sustainability of their business, economic sustainability and environmental sustainability. So this is absolutely enormous. Now, in terms of back to farming in the UK, there's a lot of effort going on in terms of sustainability. And I think one of the big drivers in the UK is going to be your biggest customer. And that's the UK multiple retailers. So over recent times, I've had some great discussions with different parts of the supply chain saying is, Chris, how can we guarantee the soya that we are using is not impacting rainforests? Whoa, what a big question. And I said, well, that's a really big question. Why do you want to know that? And went, well, my biggest customer, the multiple retailer, wants me to guarantee that I am not using anything that's impacting rainforests, because this is going to be a big ticket item for people around the world. And it's not just about soya. Is the soya coming from Brazil? Is the soya coming from the north of Brazil? It's about many, many different commodities. Palm oil is another really good example. Questions about where is my palm oil coming from? Is it from sustainable supplies? Now, one of the big factors to me will be lots of people will make lots of claims about, yes, of course, everything that I do is sustainable. My soya comes from non-deforestation regions, my palm oil and so forth. And that opens up a whole new game of cheating, fraud. And I think whenever you get the multiple starting to drive different behaviors, that gives massive opportunities for people to cheat. And again, that's something that I'm going to look at really carefully next year about the claims around sustainability, particularly things like soya and palm oil. Now, I wanted to go back to this big map behind me, and I guess a lot of our issues have started from China and the origins of COVID-19. Now, a lot of people will have different theories about COVID-19 itself. Some have got the view that it was, the Chinese secret weapon to take over the world and all sorts of stuff. And, feel free to be paranoid. Absolutely fine. No trouble with me. I'm paranoid about lots of things, particularly football, and I'm just worried about the referee tonight. But I think in terms of when I start to think about what happened in China, I link it to African swine fever. Because, in China lost 50%, probably over 50% now of its pig herd to African swine fever. And they had a massive, massive deficit in animal protein. And, China is one of the booming economies. Actually, the consumption of protein is going up and up and up. And how did they deal with the deficit of protein? And yes, they were out scouring the world and trying to buy lots of pig meat from different places, but it really accelerated the market in China for eating wild animals, okay? Absolutely. And the biggest market in China for selling wild animals was, guess where? Was Wuhan. Wuhan, where COVID-19 first raised its ugly head. And certainly the data looks like that the COVID-19 virus, it is a hybrid, it is a fusion of viruses that came from bats and viruses that came from pangolin. And guess what? In Wuhan market, they were selling bats and selling pangolin and coming together. And what we need to be unbelievably careful about is that we are not going to drive other types of issues where we're getting more and more contact with wild animal species that we shouldn't be. They should be in the rainforests, and there is a whole area about sustainability, right, linking through planetary health and human health, that we really have to start thinking about more. And while I'm talking about China and the issues about protein, I don't know if any of you are aware, but currently in China, they're short of food. It's not something that you will see on the BBC News. It's not something that you'll read about widely. But I spent a lot of time in China, and this year I haven't been there, but I keep up really good discussions and communications with many, many Chinese academics, people from industry and regulatory agencies. Now, what has happened in China is the president, Xi Jinping, probably the second most important, most powerful person in the world after Donald, but Donald's going to be spending more time with his family and playing golf, hopefully, we hope. So we've got Xi Jinping, second most powerful man in the world, and he is making speech after speech after speech about food. He's telling people that it is illegal, immoral to waste food. He's telling people that they have to start to produce more food, and that the movement of people from the countryside into the cities has to stop. There's lots and lots of discussions about food at a very high level in China. Now, what has triggered this is partly African swine fever, partly COVID-19, but most importantly of all is the factor of climate change. Our climate is changing right across the world. We have colleagues within our Institute for Global Food Security start mapping different incidents that are happening in different parts of the world, these extreme weather events. So what's happened in China this year is there has been a multitude of extreme weather events, particularly in the south of China. That is a big agricultural region, and because of massive rainfall and massive flooding, that had crop failure after crop failure. What that has done is the price of food now in China is starting to rise. And I hear it from cities like Shanghai and Beijing. People are starting to go, whoa, food prices are really starting to go up now. Now, to keep China together, functioning as that big, big state, President Xi Jinping knows that one of the things that will destabilize The communist system in China is a lack of food, because there's nothing more will bring people back onto the streets again. So what China is now doing is scouring the world for food. And this isn't short-term stuff. China thinks 20, 30, 50 years ahead. And a lot of the supply chains we can see are already being diverted from going from Southeast Asia, from Thailand and Vietnam, into European markets, now going into Chinese markets. So there's lots and lots of different things that are happening. The last thing I just wanted to touch upon, and I'm not sure much time I've left, Claire, I'm just rambling.
We're pressing on for time a bit now, so yes, if I could ask you kindly to
finish off is all of those different factors. What we've got to think about is resilience of our food supply system in the UK. And there is not a better time about thinking about changing that balance. 60% self-sufficient, importing 40%. You know, not that long ago, it used to be 70-30. And my message to a lot of people is, how do we go from 60-40 to 70-30? And that is about creating new jobs, new ways of farming, new crops, doing things in a very, very different way. And it has to be economically sustainable, and it has to be environmentally sustainable. But I think it's such an unbelievable opportunity, because of all of these different things that are happening. Now is the time I think we need to talk about, let's make the UK and Irish food supply system much more resilient going forwards. So I'm going to stop talking now, because I think if Claire was sitting beside me, she would probably be hitting me on my shoulder. So I'm going to stop there.
That's lovely, Chris. Thank you ever so much. So much of the content of your speech has given me cause for thought in a negative respect, in terms of for food fraud and the concern about dietary nutrition, not only as a farmer but as a mother. But really, I can't help but feel positive about the story that we've got to tell in terms of Welsh lamb and Welsh beef. One of the seminars we had last night on the meat eating quality project, and the credentials of Welsh lamb to be able to provide a lot of those missing ingredients to the diet, and it's a natural source that the body can't produce itself. We really have got a good story to tell. And certainly in terms of animal health and sustainability, we are primarily a grass-based environment where certainly any feed would be a supplement, not a staple. So our credentials there really stand up quite high, I feel. I really want to give an opportunity for questions. So I can see there's one or two there. If there's any more to come through, please get them posted. I can see Wyn Evans, of NFU, you're asking quite a pointed questions in terms of what level of sustainability would you like to see in your ideal world, Chris?
Yeah, and it's a really easy question. It needs to be sustainable. What we need to do is to have the right balance. And some of the dreadful statistics that you see when you start to talk about, let's say, beef production is the terrible greenhouse gases that are produced, and it accounts for 30%. That's absolute nonsense, and I think we all know that that's nonsense, because that's about gross and not about net. So I think to start off with, let's actually get the calculations right. And when you can get your calculations right, I'm an analytical chemist. I really like to measure things properly. And what we have to do is to strive not for zero neutrality. Agriculture, food production could actually be a big win for the whole planet if we do things correctly.
I can see that Mike Goodin, he's been a great contributor to our seminars over the last couple of nights, and making comments in line with what I said earlier, really, in terms of really concentrating on what we feed our animals in terms of what we get out at the other end, and how that supports our marketing campaign going forward. HCC currently is in the process of launching our new sustainability roadmap, the Welsh Way. And so I'm hopeful we're going to have some more information within that to share with levy payers in terms of new research on emissions and carbon capture, and the use of our livestock in terms of contributing to biodiversity. So it's an ambitious roadmap, but we are ambitious in Wales. We don't shy away from it, and you know, we're really aiming to produce red meat in a sustainable way. So we're looking forward to that. I'm looking at the time, and I'm very conscious that Gwyn will be chairing the next session that will be coming up. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you sincerely, Chris, for speaking with us this evening. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. I hope everybody else has. I'd like to thank the participants who joined in with questions as well, making my job a little bit easier. And I just want to signpost you all now to the next session, the final session, which will be hosted by Gwyn Howells, and it's due to start now any minute. So the seminar will be all around the path to climate neutrality. Now, Frank Mitterlerner of the CLEAR Center at the University of California, Davis. He's one of the world's most in-demand experts on environmental policy and sustainability. He's going to be sharing with us his thoughts on the often misunderstood role of red meat production as we aim towards net zero. So I'm hoping you can all join into that next session, and I just want to conclude by thanking you all and wishing you a very good evening. Nos da.